Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content.
Pine Leaf rides out onto the Montana plain. She spots the buffalo and waves her fellow hunters over. They start galloping toward their quarry. Suddenly, from behind a hill, a couple of raiders rush at them. Wait, no, it's not just a pair of raiders. They're bringing an entire band of enemy warriors. The buffalo can wait. Without missing a beat, Pine Leaf readies her weapons and signals to her companions the change of plans. Follow her as she pursues the enemy. Pine Leaf's companions immediately take up attack positions, arrows drawn, rifles cocked. The men follow her without question, because she's not just Pine Leaf out to hunt buffalo. Her name is Biawachichish, Woman Chief, and she is war leader of the Crow.
Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am here with my co-host, Dr. Pat Larish. And Pat, we are not going to talk about the Roman Empire this week.
Oh.
I know, I'm sorry.
We
did two in a row.
Yeah, but we've got other things to talk about.
We have other things to talk about, yes.
Yeah,
yes, so it is, it is, fall is coming, the leaves are changing, and things are, it's cold and rainy here in Seattle. It's really been, just brutal. The time change and the daylight savings and all that. It's just dark and wet and cold and raining and just rough. Is it like that in Boston right now?
It is, yeah. It's not raining. We actually haven't had rain for a while, which, okay. But it is definitely fall.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we had some warm weather recently, it's become very cold. It actually went below freezing today. And the trees are doing the classic New England thing. I'm not even out in the countryside. I'm just walking around, and the trees are beautiful fall colors.
Yes, we have that here as well. Like that's a thing that the Pacific Northwest is known for: rain and pretty leaves.
Yes, go trees. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of trees, I guess.
Yes. I'm open to contrived segues.
Let's
Speaking
do it.
of trees.
Speaking of trees changing colors, we have a really fun badass to talk about this week. And we are going to talk about a woman named Pine Leaf. And Pine Leaf is one of the names by which she is known. We'll probably we'll get into it more later, but she's known by several different names. But she was a warrior chief of the Crow people in the mid 1800s. And her story is pretty awesome. She accomplished some pretty amazing things and just seems like just a really tough character, just a really badass person and a great, person to talk about right now.
Yes.
So I guess to start, we should go with a quote. And there's a quote that I really love here about her. It's by a guy named James Bloody Arm Beckworth, who... That's a story.
Apparently.
Yes.
Not for this episode, but it's a rabbit hole one could go down.
Yes. Bloody Arm Beckworth, American frontiersman. He writes about her in his memoirs, and he says, "I conceive it to be my duty to devote a few lines to the bravest woman that ever lived, namely Pine Leaf, Bar Chiampi in the Crow language. She was endowed with extraordinary muscular strength, with the activity of a cat and the speed of an antelope. When I engaged in the fiercest struggles, no one was more promptly at my side than the young heroine. She seemed incapable of fear, and when she arrived at womanhood, could fire a gun without flinching and use weapons with as great a dexterity as the most accomplished warrior." So that is what we're going to talk about here. Just a really badass, like frontier Old West warrior
Yeah.
chief. So
And this is from James Bloody Arm Beckworth, who is an American frontiersman himself. So he knows what he's talking about.
you don't get a name like Bloody Arm Beckworth without like knowing something about badass people or combat
One
or something,
assumes,
right?
yes. Yeah.
So that's what we're going to talk about. We have
Yeah,
a
yeah.
great episode today, and we're going to take a pause right now for a quick commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to get into the story. So please stay with us. Our story begins in Montana in the 1820s. You're probably wondering about that Bloody Arm Beckworth guy, so we are going to start with him and his story.
So, yeah, even though he's not the title of our episode, we need to know about him.
Yeah, we got to know about this Bloody Arm Beckworth guy.
Yeah.
His birth name is James. He was born an enslaved person in Virginia, but he escaped slavery. He fled west. We encountered some of this when we were talking about Bass Reeves a few weeks ago. But
yeah.
he escaped slavery. He fled west into the what was called at the time the Indian Territories, where you didn't have a lot of the U.S. government didn't have as much sway. So he went and lived with the Crow people. He learned their language, and
Woo!
yeah, linguists.
Woo! Yeah, okay. And I'm sure he learned a lot of other things too.
Yes.
Yeah,
fighting, and he learned their style of combat. He went hunting with them. He kind of lived with the tribe for years. And as he's with them, he encounters a woman that he calls Pine Leaf. And she captures his attention pretty much immediately. And while his exploits are pretty interesting, the name Bloody Arm Beckworth comes from like fighting people with a sword and having blood on his arms, right? Like that's the name is what it sounds like. But
okay, so even in the U.S. in the 1800s, there's this guy going around with a sword.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is like he's got a cavalry saber, right? So this is, he's fighting not just in the Old West style, but also, I mean, this is like kind of before six shooters, right? So the 1820, you're still using flintlocks, maybe early percussion caps, but not six shooters, right? And so you shoot your one shot and then you got to fight with a sword, right? And so he's pretty good at that apparently, because he gets the nickname Bloody Arm from his arm getting all bloody from blood spray, which is pretty badass. So this guy, like we said, he knows what he's talking about.
Yes. And he writes his memoirs, and he's impressed enough by this woman he refers to as Pine Leaf.
Right.
Or Barchiampi in her language.
Right.
Yeah.
He is so infatuated with her that he spends much of his memoirs talking about her, like even more than he talks about himself. So the two of them and the other warriors of the tribe, they go out horseback riding, they do archery, they do rifle marksmanship, hunting. There's even like skirmishes with some tribes nearby. And he meets this woman and is like fascinated by her. So, according to Beckworth, Pine Leaf was probably born around 1806. She was originally a member of a tribe called the Gros Ventre, which I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
I would say Gros Ventre is probably a name that the French applied to these people. A translation like big stomach, whatever the context is for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gros Ventre, and so she's born in the Gros Ventre. She's not actually born into the Crow Nation, but
she ends up
as
there.
We'll find out.
Yes, because they're in the foothills of Montana, and there are a few tribes that are in conflict at this time. So when Pine Leaf is around the age of 10, her tribe is raided by a Crow warband, and she's captured and brought back to the Crow village. And she is basically given to a foster family among the Crow, taken from her home, put in with a family of Crow who raise her as their own daughter. And, there's various assigned duties in the tribe.
Mhm.
The women of the tribe learn to do this stuff, and the men of the tribe learn to do this other stuff. Right?
Right. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
happens, and so.
Yeah. It happens all over the world. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
And so Pine Leaf is not interested in she is much more interested in the horseback riding and shooting and archery and hunting. And before long, she becomes known as the best shooter and the fastest rider of everybody in this Crow village, which is saying
Hey,
something
good for
because,
her.
yeah, it's saying something because
Yeah.
the Crow are a pretty badass tribe. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
people here
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
good at shooting and riding horses. And so she, she has these two brothers, foster brothers, that she's
Hmm.
living with, and during various raids, the two brothers are either killed or captured in battle
Oh
by rival
no.
tribes. Yeah, so she's the only
Ooh.
surviving sibling of these three, and so her father
Aha.
says, you are already better than everybody at the riding and shooting. You are to be as a son to me now. And
Aha.
yes. And so
Okay.
he adopts her as a, kind of, I don't know what they would call that, promotes her to being a, a warrior or
Uh,
something.
okay. Yeah. 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 And sounds like she's totally on board with this.
Yes, she loves it. So this is what she's been wanting, and she finally gets it. And so, um, as part of that, she swears to avenge her fallen brothers, which is a thing that I think she will accomplish at a certain point. But we have kind of our sources on her are a little bit dicey, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But
Yes, we will.
yes,
Yeah.
and so
Yes.
what
Yeah.
we know about her, so this is all kind of the backstory that Beckworth gives us. Beckworth meets her in the 1820s. So
she's a teenager.
she's a late teen, early 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She's already among the leaders of the tribe. So she's kind of established herself as a leader. Her adoptive father dies, and so she takes over the household and brings it, according to Beckworth, he says, brings it to prominence among the tribe.
Brings it to prominence. That's, yes.
Brings it to prominence. I just love the way that the people from this time period wrote, And,
Yes.
And so she apparently was really well known among her people for going out on foot into the wilderness with a bow or a rifle, and then coming back with bison meat or buffalo meat, bighorn deer, elk. She would go out on foot and
Yeah.
hunt this large game, bring it down, which is no small feat with a bow and arrow in 1820, and then skin it and dress it in the field, and then just bring back as much as she could carry on her shoulders.
Okay.
Which is...
So it's hey, I went grocery shopping.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, grocery shopping, and also, participated in the cycle of life, and,
yes.
Probably recognized the role that the animals had in the whole ecosystem and whatever. And
I clicked,
hey.
I clicked add to cart next to the ground beef picture on Instacart,
Yes. Yeah.
She took a bow and arrow out to the wilderness and brought down a buffalo.
Yeah. And then she's like, hey, food.
Yes. And she there's a lot of ink in these accounts of her dedicated to how well she could skin an animal. So, and this is among people who are not squeamish about skinning animals. This is, but people who this is a thing that you do all the time. But apparently she was super good at it. I don't know what that looks like, and they don't really elaborate, but that's
I respect excellence.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was very competent with the paring knife at skinning a buffalo.
Yeah. Yes. And a buffalo is not a small animal. So
yes.
Yeah. It takes skill and stamina, I would imagine.
Yes. Okay. So Bloody Arm Beckworth, he's fascinated by her, as we've mentioned, and so is pretty much every other eligible bachelor in her tribe. And he asks her to marry him. And
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
on paper, this is a pretty power couple, right?
But this is specifically Pine Leaf, and I don't know. She has a history of rejecting feminine, femi gender roles. she's like, no, I don't like, okay, like I'll do the girly things, but like the girly chores, but I'm more interested in the boy chores, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and that will
So,
come up, and it's going to come up again in a little bit as well, because and we'll see this with her as we keep going, because what she tells him first is, I'm sorry, when I swore to avenge my fallen brothers to my now dead adopted, or my now deceased foster father, I
yeah.
swore that I wouldn't take a husband until I had killed 100 men in battle.
Okay.
And so I think it's kind of one of the things that is interesting when you're talking about this, and you're like, is that, I think there is this implication that when she gets married, that's the end of her career as a warrior, right? I think there is this implication that, like,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
gonna, I like you because you're this badass warrior chick, but once we get married, you're just gonna settle down, right? And I don't know. I think there's an implication of that, and she rejects, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so she says, no, I got to kill 100 men in battle before I can marry you. Sorry. It's kind of the Atalanta
Okay.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Only killed the person who could beat me in a race.
Yeah.
And
So has she killed 100 dudes yet?
we don't know how many she kills in her life, but at this point, she's 19 or 20. She has not killed 100 men. She has not killed 0, I think. I think she has killed a couple of men by this point. But, he goes, like, Bloody Arm Beckworth goes into battle with her, and they fight rival tribes, and she accounts herself pretty admirably. He doesn't kind of get into a lot of the bloody details of it, but he does mention in the beginning that, like, anytime I was really hassled by enemy riders, she was right there with me to help me fight them off. So I imagine she has probably killed a couple of people at this point, but we don't know for sure. Anyway, she tells him she can't marry him because she doesn't kill 100 people. And so he's like, okay, he lets that go for a little bit. And then eventually he's like, well, come on. I mean, how many people have you killed now? She's like, oh, I'm only up to 5. I've killed 5 men now. And he's like, okay, well, 100's going to take a long time. Like, can we just get married? And she says, okay, fine. I will marry you when the pine leaves turn yellow. And he's like, all right, it's springtime now. It's fall. The leaves are going to change. That's not bad. I can wait till fall.
And listeners, what do you know about pine trees?
Aren't they Christmas trees?
When we think of pine trees, Christmas trees, or even if you're out like walking in the woods in the winter, right, we imagine all these vistas of yellow needles on the trees, right?
The needles turn brown after they fall off the tree. But while they are on the tree...
Yeah, but they're green because pines are evergreen.
Yes.
And as advertised...
Pine trees never turn yellow.
So...
Fall comes around... Bloody Arm Beckworth should have known better. He should have picked it up right away. But
he totally should have. Yeah.
You live in the wilderness, man. You live in Montana, riding around you should know this.
Yeah, and he seems like he picks up on other stuff. Like he learned how to speak Crow. He learned how to do all of these other like fighting skills.
He's a pretty clever guy. He just, I think he was just so happy that she said yes that he didn't really think about it. And she's like, oh, totally marry you when the pine leaves turn. And he's like, okay, great. And then he goes home and he thinks about it a little bit and he's like, oh.
Womp womp.
Yeah. And then he goes back and he's like, oh, hey, a pine leaf, pine leaves don't turn yellow. And then she just laughs in his face. That's her reaction when he tells her. And so he calls her pine leaf and he calls her pine leaf. There's some interesting bit about this where he calls her pine leaf, and it's not clear whether that is what she is known among the Crow people or if that is just his nickname for her.
Yeah. Like, is that his name for her coming from this specific anecdote that clearly made an impression on him?
Yes.
Or was that her name? And, if your name is Pine Leaf, chances are you spend some time thinking about pine trees and how they operate.
Yes. Yeah. It's just like a joke she makes all the time. Like she gets asked to be married all the time and she tells everybody this thing and that's like the joke. Or like, is it her given name and she turned it into a joke? It's unclear.
Yeah.
But he knows her as Pine Leaf and, she never agrees to marry him. And he eventually leaves and goes off on his own. And that's all we know about Pine Leaf, is that she was this badass warrior woman of the Crow tribe. So Bloody Arm Beckworth leaves her in the late 1820s. And we are going to take a really quick break. But when we come back, there's going to be another group of people that come through about 20 years later. And they meet a woman who, they don't call her Pine Leaf, but she has a lot of similar characteristics. She's the right age. And I think it's pretty safe to say she's going to be the same person. So when we come back, we are going to talk about a different group of people who visit the Crow in the 1840s, and they meet a woman that they know as Woman Chief, because she is now the leader of the tribe.
So you've had a chance to meet Pine Leaf, and we've mentioned that there are two different sources. And the woman we know as Pine Leaf is from one source, the memoir of Bloody Arm Beckworth. And then there's another person named Woman Chief from a different source. There's enough congruence between the two people that we're going to take them as referring to the same person. And we're not the only people who do this. A lot of people do think that these are actually references to the same person.
The physical descriptions match up. The time period is correct. The location's correct. But there are some minor details that don't match up between Beckworth's account of her backstory and the second group is a group of traders named Denig and Kurtz. Like they showed up to trade goods or whatever, and they met her and were very impressed by her as well. They give some different accounts of her backstory, but really minor differences, and it seems extremely probable that this is the same person. But we do kind of need to disclaimer this.
Disclaimer. And also, this is the 19th century, and we're out in that part of the continent where we don't have that many written records, so we make the most of what we can. And so Denig and Kurtz, they're writing over a decade later, so, who knows?
Yeah, but it seems likely.
It seems like, So we're going to just go ahead.
Yeah. And so when they return, and I'll give you Denig's quote on her, which is going to really read like Beckworth's, although his diction is slightly different. He said, "She could rival any of the young men in all of their amusements and occupations, was a capital shot with the rifle, and would spend much of her time in killing deer and bighorn, which she butchered and carried home on her back when hunting on foot." And now at this point, she's in her 40s, or she's older now, right? So she's in her 40s, maybe early 50s. She's the chief of this tribe, and she is a war chief of the Crow. Now, what does that mean? We have an interesting story from World War II, actually, about what it takes to be a war chief of the Crow.
There are specific requirements.
Yes, there are 4 requirements to be a war chief of the Crow. And there was a man named Joe Medicine Crow, or you'll see it sometimes as Joe Medicine Crow High Bird. He was a World War II veteran. He was the last war chief of the Crow tribe. And I want to tell his story briefly, because I think that's going to implicate, like you said, we have to fill in this gap between Beckworth and Denig Kurtz. And while she was not a chief when Beckworth left, she is the chief of the tribe now when Denig and Kurtz find her. So
and she's known as Woman Chief.
Yeah, that is her name. That is what they call her.
Yeah.
They don't call her Pine Leaf anymore.
Beachowishish in Crow. Yeah,
what was it?
In Apsaloke. Beachowishish.
Okay.
So tell us about Joe Medicine Crow.
Joe Medicine Crow was in the PhD anthropology program at USC in 1939 when World War II started. And he left school to join World War II. He was in the infantry. He was in the 103rd Infantry at Normandy, attacking, the D-Day battle. And so, yeah, so
Wow.
he's fighting in Normandy in 1944. And he decides, like, he is a member of the Crow Nation and he wants to complete these requirements for being a Crow chief. He is descended from chiefs of the tribe and he wants to kind of honor his ancestors by doing this. Okay, first thing you need to do to be a war chief of the Crow is to lead a successful war party. In World War II, Joe Medicine Crow, he accomplishes this by, he earns a Bronze Star for bravery by there was a German position along the Siegfried line on the border of France and Germany, and he snuck up to it and blew a hole in the wall with some TNT and fought a couple of Germans and won the Bronze Star for bravery for doing all of this under machine gun fire. And he was a squad leader at the time. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that counts as leading a war party.
that's a successful
Okay.
war party. Yeah, it has to be a successful
Yeah.
war party. And so,
Successful. Yeah.
yes.
That sounds successful. Yeah.
You have to take an enemy's weapon from him. And so at one point, Joe Medicine Crow is in this city in France, and he's moving in to get some reconnaissance. He's on a patrol, and he rounds this corner into this alley of this French town, and he bumps directly into a German soldier. And
oh no!
Yeah, and the German soldier goes to pull a rifle up on him. Joe Medicine Crow, he doesn't have he can't get to his weapon fast enough. He can't get it up fast enough. He grabs the German soldier's rifle, and they start wrestling for it. And then Joe Medicine Crow takes it from him. So he take a weapon from an enemy soldier. That's number 2.
Okay. So we've ticked off 2 of the 4 requirements.
Yes.
Okay.
The third one is to touch an enemy without killing him.
Oh, that's subtle.
Yes. So
how does he do this?
Well, it's the same story. So he's got that gun from that German soldier. He goes to try to point it at him, but the soldier knocks it out of his hand. So now the gun's out of play and they're wrestling. They're fighting hand to hand. Joe Medicine Crow gets the guy down and is choking him. And the guy starts to call out for his mom as he's dying. And Joe's I can't kill this guy. This is horrible. This is the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. I'm not doing that. And so he doesn't kill the guy. He takes him prisoner.
Okay.
And that's touching an enemy without killing him. Okay, we can assume Pine Leaf has led a successful war party, has taken an enemy's weapon from him, and has touched an enemy without killing him.
Okay.
The fourth one...
So that's 75% of the way.
75% of the way.
What's the 4th and last requirement?
The 4th one is one we have already seen Pine Leaf do, but it's going to be a little bit trickier for Joe Medicine Crow. It is steal an enemy's horse.
Ooh. I'm just thinking in 2024, how likely is that? But this is
1944, so maybe.
And Joe Medicine Crow seems like a resourceful kind of guy, so...
He's a resourceful kind of guy. And, Pat, you have told us the story of how Handsome Mignon stole 10,000 pintos, but...
Okay, might be a slightly exaggerated in an epic context, but multiple pintos, more than one horse.
But in 1945, Joe Medicine Crow was near an enemy German position where the Germans were stabling the horses for their officer corps. And he snuck into their stockade at night wearing his full U.S. Army uniform.
Okay, so he wasn't hiding anything.
No, he was wearing his uniform. He snuck in there at night, right?
But he wasn't trying to go in disguise.
No, he wore his combat gear.
I'm actually a stable boy.
Went in there, jumped on one of the horses bareback because he couldn't saddle him up. Gets on one of the horses bareback, rides all 50 horses out of the stables while singing traditional Crow war songs by himself.
Way to go, Joe!
Joe Medicine Crow, right? Yeah. So
whoa.
Yeah. So he steals 50 horses from German officers in World War II. Yeah, that's badass, right? That's Joe Medicine Crow. He's badass war chief of the Crow tribe. That is the kind of people we are dealing with here, and that is the kind of requirements for a war chief. And when we re-encounter Pine Leaf, we can assume that at some point in those 20 missing years, she has led a successful war party, taken an enemy's weapon from him, touched an enemy without killing him, and stolen an enemy's horse. And this is the type of people that we're dealing with. And when Denig and Kurtz arrive, she is like a superhero among the Crow tribe. There are songs written about her victories. She has this kind of mythical status among the tribe. It's too bad that none of these songs survive, right? Because they would sing the songs of
Yeah. Yeah.
the Crow people had an oral tradition which was very very rich, but a lot of those stories are lost to us now,
Got
which
quashed.
is yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so when Edwin Denig and Rudolph Kurtz meet her, she is just like, she is the chief of the tribe. She is the most badass person we have. She is the leader of us, and she's awesome. And this is when she gets the title that you had mentioned,
Beachowishish.
Beachuishish, which just
Beachowishish.
means woman chief.
It means woman chief. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's that was not a super common thing at this time period, and just like, oh, it's the woman chief.
No.
She's the one. She's the chief, right? We just call her that.
Yep. That's her.
She had, when they met her, you talked about her not wanting to really, her wanting to do the more like traditionally manly things in the tribe. When they meet her, she has 4 wives who do all of the housework and cooking and all of that stuff for her. So it's 4 women from her tribe. They live in her house and they take care of everything that she needs to get done, right? They do all that stuff for her. She's not washing dishes. She's not cooking the meals. She's not doing any of that stuff. She's got a team of people that do that for her.
Okay.
Which, Denig is very excited about the idea that she has 4 wives. He writes about it a lot, as you'd imagine.
Uh-huh.
But Denig mentions in his story that Woman Chief has earned her place as the war leader. She really cemented her legacy in this battle, at which she took this leading role. So she was already kind of a war leader, really respected, well-known. She and a group of Crow had gone to an American fort, and there were some families in there. They were doing some trading, right? They went down there, brought some stuff to trade it. They were coming back, but the fort was attacked by a raiding party of a different tribe, the Blackfoot. So the Blackfoot raid this American fort, and this sounds like a cowboy movie, like because she's kind of like there's riders on the horizon. The fort is undermanned, but she's there with her guys who are warriors, and she kind of takes over the defense of the fort.
Okay, it's undermanned or underpersoned. And she's got her guys, and I'm from the Northeast.
But I am no man. We need no man.
Exactly. Yeah. Like her people. Let's just put it out there that we're using guys in maybe the gender neutral, gender inclusive sense. Now, statistically speaking, probably most of these people would have been men. But I just wanted to.
Her party that had ridden out with her, they first they organized the defenders, like, hey, you guys you get up here, like but hold the fort, we'll take care of this. And they ride out of the protective walls of the fort. So I'm picturing like a wooden stockade here. They ride out, and she leads her crew into battle. So she charges first. She's got a musket and a bow and an axe. And so she rides out, and
that's a lot of
weapons. Yeah.
Yeah.
She kills 1 enemy with a musket. She kills 2 with arrows, and then rallies the defenders and drives back the attack. And the Blackfoot are driven away. And when she comes back, she scalps those 3 people that she'd killed and rides back with their scalps and their rifles.
Because she needs proof. I mean, or not? She probably doesn't need proof at this point, but she's got the receipts.
Yes, she's got the receipts.
Yeah,
and
it feels kind of weird to talk about, scalping human beings as receipts, but at a certain level, that was a
thing that was done at this time period, right?
Yeah.
That was a thing that was done, and that's what she does. So she comes back with 3 scalps on her saddle, and people were like, "Yeah, you're pretty badass. You should be the leader here."
She knows what she's doing. Yeah.
Yes. And we have a similar story here that I want to tell. It's kind of like a bonus badass. We already had one with Joe Medicine Crow, but I have another one here. And we had just talked about the Blackfoot tribe. And the Blackfoot around this time, they also have a woman chief. Her name we know her as Running Eagle. But it's very interesting because she is from around this time period. We know that she was around in the 1840s. She's dead before 1850. We don't know much about like her, how old she was, but I imagine she was pretty young. She had been the daughter of a tribal leader, and she would join buffalo hunts, which was really no picnic in these days when you're trying to fight a
Goodness,
buffalo
yeah.
on horseback
Yeah.
with a spear, right?
Buffalo
Or
are
bow and arrow.
big.
They're big, yeah, and they've got big
Yeah.
horns.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason we have the verb buffalo in English, meaning to like, I don't know, like plow through or pummel or whatever, you know?
yeah,
Buffalo are big.
they're big.
Like, you don't argue with buffalo. I mean, okay, mere mortals do not argue with buffalo.
Yes, yes. And so Running Eagle would go on these big buffalo hunts, which was a big thing, and she did well in those. She became a war leader. She did the similar thing to what Woman Chief does. She took wives to help her
Uh-huh.
around the house while she did
Okay.
warrior things, and
Okay.
she she never married a man because she was worried that would bump her down in the hierarchy.
Okay. And seems like she's got a good situation. She's got her four wives or multiple wives? Okay.
We don't know how many, but multiple.
Okay.
I believe.
So she's got her domestic situation. It seems to be working.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
She
More
was
power to her.
She was famous for riding into battle. She never encountered Woman Chief, as far as we know. She was at war with a group called the Flathead tribe, and she was. She would go into battle with a rifle under each arm and shoot them, which just seemed, I don't know. She would carry two rifles into battle.
So, is she shooting both of them at the same time? Is she ambidextrous, maybe?
That's my read on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So there was a story where she was on a party and they were ambushed. They were on a hunting party that got ambushed, and they were riding away, and her father's horse got shot out from under him. And she went back and got her dad, but also, like, the way they tell the story is like she was so awesome that she went back and not only rescued her dad, but also got his rifle and all of the buffalo meat out of his saddlebags and brought it with her while being chased by the enemy.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. And they say that she never married a man, but she got really close one time. There was a tribe called the Blood tribe.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the chief of the Blood tribe, who sounds like a pretty badass dude, he wanted to marry her, but they went on a raid together. And on a raid, he killed 2 enemy warriors and stole 10 horses. But she killed 3 guys and stole 15 horses. So she was like, this isn't going to work out.
So she's ahead.
Yeah, she's like, this isn't going to work out between us.
Okay.
But yeah, the rifle under each arm story comes from a story where she had shot a guy, like she was riding and she shot a guy from the saddle with her rifle, and then he fell off his horse and died. She, at like a full gallop, like leaned down off her horse, picked up the rifle from the guy that she had just killed, and it was loaded, and then she shot another guy with that one. So that's the story of Running Eagle with the 2 rifles. And yeah, interesting.
She's resourceful.
She's resourceful, yeah.
She adapts to circumstances.
Yes.
That's one way of putting it, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a waterfall in Glacier Park, Montana, named after Running Eagle, which is kind of cool.
Oh, yeah. Running Eagle Waterfall. Wow.
Yeah. Running Eagle Falls.
Yeah.
So, okay, back to Woman Chief. And I realize we're taking a few digressions here, but we do have very little information on her. But I think that these side stories really kind of draw a more complete picture of what we're dealing with here. So she is...
Yeah, what might be possible for Pine Leaf.
Right. Pine Leaf is a warrior. She leads the Crow for 20 years. And as we've seen with some of the stories of her at the fort and with Running Eagle, this is not... sometimes there's peace, but sometimes there's war, and there's hunting parties, and there's raiding parties, and there's combat and struggle happening during these times. She negotiates peace treaties with some neighboring tribes and with the settlers, the frontiersmen from the United States. She also does all of the settling disputes in town kind of thing. So if you had a problem and you were a member of the tribe, you would go to her to moderate it, and she could provide you with some wisdom.
So she's got people skills as well as martial skills.
Yes. Yeah, so she's good at, she's like a good king kind of, right? She is a benevolent ruler, and in times of war and in peace. And one thing that Denning and Kurt say is that she always had her robes were always decorated with her war trophies. things she'd taken off of enemies she'd killed in battle. So even if she was trying to negotiate a peace treaty, there was always, anytime you were dealing with her, and I am picturing her at this point as like a pretty tough lady. I think anytime you were dealing with her, there was always a very visual cue that like she has killed people before. She might not have killed out 100 guys yet, but she's killed more than probably a dozen, right? And
yes.
there's little
and I kind of wonder
of
if like when she reaches 99, she just kind of keeps it there.
Oh, I didn't get that guy. You got him. I can't take credit for that one.
Yeah, she's like, okay, yeah, no, I haven't reached 100. I can't marry a dude. I don't know. Like, she seems like the sort of person who can make things work for her. You know, yeah. And so, yeah, so she, like, I don't know. Like, does she adjudicate the petty things? Like, I don't know. Like your neighbor is like their animals are grazing on your land or something.
I'm sure there's stuff like that, right?
Okay,
I'm sure certain things get escalated to her. I don't think she deals with all of them, but I'm sure that like if it's a really powerful enough family or if it's a big enough argument, it will eventually get escalated to her and she's going to lay the law down.
Yeah. I would totally listen to that podcast, by the way.
Yeah. Judge Pineleaf.
Judge Pineleaf, yes. Yeah. Anyway, so that's her career.
Yeah, so she becomes chief at 20-something, somewhere between, or somewhere in her 20s. She leads the Crow for 20 years in war and in peace. And she is a diplomatic person, but that is what ends up being her downfall, actually. So,
oh no!
Yeah,
what?
So she will die in battle in 1854. Which, if the 1806 number that Beckworth gives us is accurate, that puts her into like her late 40s at this point.
Okay.
And she is trying to strengthen a peace treaty between the Crow and the Gros-Ventre, the tribe that she was a member of, her old tribe.
Yeah.
And there has been, she was taken from that tribe in a raid, and there has been raiding happening for her entire life. And so she and some of her bodyguards ride out to try to negotiate a peace treaty with a chief of the Gros-Ventre, but they're ambushed. It's a trap, and they're attacked. Pineleaf and her crew, they pull their weapons, and she fights, and they say she wounded a couple of the enemy, but she's killed in battle at age of 48 under a flag of peace, which is kind of a bummer.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of sad. Like, she was a person who was known for being a great warrior, but that is a violent time, right? It's a violent time period. And
violent time. And, she tried.
She tried.
Yeah. She tried. And it sounds like she had skills both in war and in peace.
Yeah.
Maybe not that particular situation, but sounds like she was adjudicating disputes and...
Mm-hmm. And she had created she had negotiated a lot of peaceful relations with the settlers in the area, with the white settlers in the area as well, because there was, you have these guys coming in and staying, and there was active trade between her tribe and the frontier forts, and so there was some of that as well. So.
Okay.
Anyway, that is Pineleaf. She's the woman chief of the Crow. When Beckworth meets her in 1820, she is like this badass warrior. And then when they meet her again, when we see her again in the 1850s, she is this like hardened chief. And she was a person that people didn't mess with and who accomplished some pretty great things.
And she knew who she was, and she just went with that.
Yes, absolutely. Really interesting person. It's too bad we don't know more about her, and that some of those songs about her exploits didn't survive to this day, because the little tidbits that we have, they just leave me wanting more, right? I want to know more about this raid where she and the chief of the Bloods went out and killed a half dozen people and stole 25 horses, right? I feel like there's a story there, and I wish we had more of it, But we can only kind of look at the surrounding stories and try to imagine what this would have looked like. But I think it's pretty badass.
Yeah, and what such a person brings to peaceful enterprises also. She has to adjudicate disputes either within her nation or between her nation and other nations,
Right, with scalps hanging off of her saddle, perhaps, right?
So she's got range, she's got skills. She's known as Woman Chief, Beatrice or pine leaf, barchiampi. And yeah.
And that's our
There you
badass for this
go.
week. Yeah. So as all
Yeah.
the leaves turn yellow around you, the pine leaf never will. Okay, that's our episode for this week. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you liked it. If you did, please send us a message and let us know. Otherwise,
Yeah.
and we will. I guess we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah. Stay badass. And if you're a tree, if you're a coniferous tree, stay evergreen.
Yes.
Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are me, Ben Thompson, Dr. Patricia Larish, and Andrew Jacobs. Writing is by me and Pat. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Mixing and music and sound design by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeartRadio. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and tell your enemies. And please leave us a rating. We'll be back next week with another one.